All right, welcome back to Section 5, Estimating Energy Expenditure. In this section, we're going to look at a number of different ways that we can estimate energy expenditure, and we're going to use our bodybuilder that we had in our previous section to compare to some of these estimates. We know energy expenditure varies based on the sport and the amount of activity, goals, and, there's a lot of different things that will affect their energy expenditure. When we look at their energy expenditure, particularly at rest, there are a couple of different equations that become predominant that we see a lot. Two of the most common are the Cunningham and the Harris-Benedict. We'll even show you a few more as we go through, but these are the two most common. The thing about the Cunningham equation is that you need to know the body composition of your athlete. So you need to have done some type of body composition analysis, because in the formula you have to put in their percent of fat-free mass. Not how much body fat they have, percent body fat, but the percent of fat-free, which is everything else. There's the formula for that. And if we were to take our bodybuilder from the previous module, he's 206 pounds, and go through this process, and let's say his percent fat is 15%, which that makes him 85% fat-free, then you go through this calculation, putting his body weight in kilograms, and go through the calculation. That ends up being about 2,200 calories per day, which is only 200 calories off from our metabolic rate that we got from the metabolic cart, the indirect calorimetry method. So pretty darn close, within 200 calories. All right, so let's look at the next equation to estimate resting energy expenditure. The Harris-Benedict, it's a really common one. If you were to Google metabolic rate calculator, guessing that this is the one that would pop up. And there are two different formulas, one for men and one for women. And yes, these numbers are different. 66 for men here and 655 for women. And all the numbers, the constants are different for men versus women. And this is not a new equation. Look, 1919 is when this one was developed. So it's been around really long time, but it's really pretty accurate. If we were to take our bodybuilder, our 206-pound bodybuilder, and we were to plug this information in, if you go through and do the math, if you look down at the very bottom down here, I've got the number, it comes up to be about 2,091 calories. With the metabolic cart, we got 2,000. With the Cunningham equation, we got 2,200. With the Harris-Benedict, we've got about 2,100. So there's really pretty close. And to give you another way, the ballpark method. So I've seen it where you basically take your body weight and multiply it by 10, or sometimes you can go by 11. I've seen it 11 as well. You then do that math. Even if you use our bodybuilder, it comes up to be pretty darn close. 206 times 10 is basically 2,060 calories. So if you take all these different methods, they're all going to be pretty darn close. And that's what I like to show when I do my exercise physiology labs in class, which is the resting metabolic rate lab is always the favorite for my students, because all they have to do is lay there. We will not only test their metabolic rate using the cart, but we will also then choose one of these equations and compare. Using, in an Excel spreadsheet, we'll test the actual measured on the cart versus the predicted by one of these equations. And sure enough, 95% of the time, there's no statistic. And we'll run a little t-test, right, to look at the differences. And 95% of the time, there's no statistical difference. That's what I tell my students. If you can get within a candy bar of, getting the numbers that you get on a metabolic cart, then just use the equation, right? So don't forget, this is just for resting energy expenditure. You still have to add the calories through exercise and the calories through the thermal effect of food. Ways that we can estimate exercise energy expenditure, there's a number of different ways we can do this. We can use what's called the compendium of activities, and this is usually at the back of any kind of exercise physiology or nutrition textbook, where it can give you the number of calories per minute for each of these activities in males for females or females. It gives you a range where you can estimate the calories burned through different activities. And these can be important. Like, for instance, cycling at 15 miles an hour. For females, it's 7.4. For males, it's about 9 calories a minute. for swimming, 50 yards per minute, which is pretty good pace. And that's about 8.8 calories for females and 12 calories for men. Now, I realize there's no weight involved in this. Again, what you're trying to do is trying to get a ballpark figure to estimate how many calories are they burning through exercise. If you were to look, you could just add in the calories if you wanted to, right? Because how many calories do we burn when we walk or run a mile? I can use that too. We usually burn about 100 calories a mile. So if you went out and ran for 5 miles, you could kind of guess that's going to be 500 to 600 calories that you burn through exercise. So there's a number of different ways to do it. The interesting thing about these compendiums is they have different categories. I mean, they get really specific with home activities and lawn and garden and you name it, and you can find it. And then I just wanted to make you aware of another way to do this. And I like this way. There's a lot of really good sports dietitians out there and a lot of good sport nutrition textbooks. And one of my favorite sport nutritionists is Marie Dunford. She's got a lot of good stuff out there, but what she has in her textbook is a chart basically that estimates total energy expenditure. Now, the difference between this and what I just showed you in the previous slides is this includes everything. This uses calories per kilogram per day to determine total energy expenditure. Calories per kilogram per day for males and for females. So there are two separate calculations here, and the numbers you'll see are a little different. But here's the thing I want you to note from this is that this is for athletes. So when we say sedentary, this is a sedentary athlete who maybe is recovering from an injury. So the way you would go about doing this is you would choose your level of activity. Am I moderate? How much am I training? And then based on that, you would go over and you would determine the calories per kilogram of body weight that would be appropriate. If I'm a softball player, female softball player, maybe I would use 34 calories per kilogram per day or 35 calories per kilogram per day. Again, what you're trying to do is get a ballpark here, get a starting point as you're working with your athletes as they begin to track what they're doing, and then you tweak based on, feedback from your athletes or your clients that you're working with. And you can even get up to all the way, extreme rigorous training here. If you're running 15 miles a day, that's a lot. We just said 100 calories a mile. That's an extra 1,500 calories at least. If you're burning 100 calories, remember if you're smaller, you maybe burn a little less than 100. But if you're a little heavier, you might be burning a little more. So we just use 100 as a good ballpark. But that's a lot of extra calories. And this type of individual would be burning 50 calories per kilogram per day. If you do the math on that, that's quite a lot. And this is for the females. For the guys, it can be up to 60. Another thing I want to point out, because this is for like athletes, if you've got a client, you could go less than this. You could go 24 or 25 calories per kilogram up to 30, and that would work. For people that are just maybe Jane or Joe Fitness, maybe they're 27 calories or 28 calories per kilogram. This is where you're using your professional judgment. The bottom line is pick a method and stick with it. I'm just showing you a variety of different ways. We were put this all together to give you an example here. We got a 130-pound, 5'8" collegiate swimmer who we measure her body fat, and it's 17%, which means she's 83% fat-free. And we go through these different equations just to show you, just to compare. Here's the Cunningham equation. Since she's 83% fat-free, we put this number in, we do the math, and that's 1,600 calories for rest, her resting energy expenditure. But then since she's a swimmer, we'll use the compendium, which we just saw on a previous slide, that said she's burning 8.8 calories per minute. So let's say she swims for an hour and a half, and she may not be swimming the whole hour and a half, but just as an estimate here, and that comes up to about 800 calories. We take the resting energy expenditure plus the calories through exercise plus the thermal effect of food, which is an extra 10%, right? So we take that 1,600 times 0.1, and that's 160. So when you add all this up, it's about 2,600 calories. If you were to use Dunford's method, where you're using calories per kilogram per day, I chose, if we go back, I chose this section here where they're swimming 6,000 to 10,000 meters a day, because if she's swimming an hour and a half or so a day, then that would fit for her. And we might have to, play around with these numbers just a smidgen. But for the example's sake, I just used 37. Then all you have to do is take that and multiply it times her weight in kilograms, which is, she's 130 pounds, so that's 59 kilograms, and that comes up to be about 2,200 calories. So you get a range of anywhere from 2,200 to 25 to 2,600. So there's a little range in there. The bottom line is, to kind of wrap this section up, you're going to choose a method and stick with it. And so when you combine all this together, the resting metabolic rate plus the exercise, calories through exercise and activity, and then add that to the thermal effect of food, that's going to get your overall total energy expenditure. Or the other option is to do it as Dunford described in calories per kilogram per day, and that works also. So that finishes up Section 5. And Section 6, we're going to look at some of the apps and tools used for tracking intake and expenditure.